So today we're going to be responding to my very first response video. I was meant to do this a few months back, but quite frankly I couldn't be bothered. And my friends Ichabod and Minty covered 14 minutes of his 40-minute video to my 15-minute video quite well. I will of course link their video below covering the first 14 minutes because I cannot be bothered to do all 40 minutes of what he's done, and I feel they've done a far better job than what I could have done to address his criticisms of my content. Now, I can't link his video either because his video is currently unavailable. Hopefully he'll make it public again so that I can link it so you can all go and watch the whole thing. If he doesn't, I'll put it up on an archive channel and, I don't know, link that. The subject of the video that he has covered is an article I covered about black students, or some black students, wanting a safe space away from other students that were not black. And a lot of his arguments seem to circle around the answer, but that's just not the way it is. And that's what initially put me off responding to him. So let's just dive in at the 14-minute mark and see what he has to say.
Guess who saw a really stupid video?
I think one of the commenters on my videos found a really stupid video, which they believe to be your video.
I did.
No, you couldn't have, because it's your video that's really stupid, along with the resolution of this, and the audio balancing of this, and the fact that a lot of your arguments boil down to, that's just not the way it is. If I was just bored enough, I would actually put a counter of the number of times you say in this video, that's just not the way it is.
Hey, what's up, Mabasei, and I'm back. Let's do this.
That was so incredibly cringeworthy. And for you, it's a shame, really, because I had to elevate your audio, cutting it out of your entire response video to me, leaving in my audio because your audio, unlike my audio, was terrible. Mine was half decent and clear and crisp, and I had to instead take yours, put it on a separate layer, and raise the volume, hoping it didn't distort, meaning everyone can hear you say that. Congratulations. And I'm looking forward to ripping into him because I think there's something obviously wrong, as if the irony of separating people based on race isn't bad enough, but this just gets even worse for you. At UCLA, the African Students' Union is insisting upon an African diaspora floor as well as an Afro house. It's not like there are facilities available already for people to be able to integrate better into the culture of Los Angeles, which, if a diaspora house exists in, must imply that Los Angeles is somewhat intolerant already, which in itself is rather stupid considering how multicultural it is. Now, as I'm rather special and don't have an afro, I can only guess what an afro house is. It is either a house for those with afros, and afros of course only the property of black people, although I have seen white people with afros, ginger ones no less, or it is Afro House a style of music. I'm hoping the former, but it's most likely the latter. Learned to like metal, it is superior to house music. Black students lack spaces.
So, you're not funny?
It is well established that I am an incredibly boring man.
And I really wish, what is with white people in thinking that the white ginger and sometimes just curly-haired white people have as afros?
Did you just assume my race? How dare you? You can quite clearly see I am a mixed-race Cthulhu-kin. Blue face, purple and green hands. I'm not going to explain this again.
Those are not afros. The things you see on the screen now are afros. Afro is short for African, just like Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-British. It means that you are of the African diaspora. You are of African descent. You cannot be a non-fucking African descendant and have an afro. That doesn't make any fucking sense. God.
Sweet, you looked up heritage, which is of course appropriate. It helps me understand diaspora. The definition states, a hairstyle consisting of a mass of very tight curls that stick out all around the head, like the natural hair of some black people. Some black people. I would be remiss if I didn't say some white people don't also have this, and I noticed you snuck yourself in that little afro thing. Yours is cute. Much like the pubes on your face.
What the fuck? Just because something's multicultural doesn't mean that there are necessarily spaces where all cultures can be talked about and celebrated.
On a college campus, tell me or name one culture that cannot be celebrated, or where there is a space where a culture cannot be celebrated. I'll give you a little moment here. Hint, It's not black.
If they're in Los Angeles, you do know that that city is like way more Latino than it is black, or it's way more Latino than it is white. Like, what are you even talking about? What do you even mean? Do you even know what you're saying right now? Like did you even research anything about LA? Like, are you serious? Like, this guy can't be fucking serious.
If you were smart, you'd have jumped ahead slightly with my video where I mentioned I go on a little bit of a ramble, and I talk about the fact that you're going to get to the point where skin becomes so focal, such a issue, that people are going to demand safe spaces based on the slightest of hues, the slightest of differences in their heritage, and the slightest of differences in their gender expressions. Now, to address your little comment about LA having a large Latino population, I did know this. I also know a large number can pass off quite easily as white, not that that's an excuse. I also want to ask you a question. How do you resolve this issue where racial populations differ so greatly in some areas? Would you go out of your way to balance them cause reasons, or would you just allow it to be and ignore race altogether? Make race a non-issue and focus solely on the academic, because that is what you are there to do. Where they feel safe and comfortable, the UCLA demands state. If black students don't feel safe, rather than creating safe spaces or exclusionary environments, which will inevitably create more racially based problems, would it not be wiser to show how inclusive the campus already is without pandering to groups that will make an already progressive environment look like it is still in the 40s? The African Diaspora Floor is a way for us to connect more to other black students, the African Student Union and the Afro-AM department. I feel like my previous comment covers this sufficiently. However, I'm up for a bit of a ramble on this subject. When you go out of your way to create a space or multiple spaces designed to give people of other races freedom to embrace heritage, you make it seem like their identity is solely about their skin and not something unique to them, i.e. they are drawn to their skin and their character and choices are not their own. I have zero problem with people embracing their heritage. I'm English and very proud of that, but universities are places of learning and not of pandering to groups that have been misled and are being made to be scared of isolated instances and bogus propaganda that is being passed off as fact.
Isolated instances. So, since we found out that the orange-faced Fuhrer is going to be the next president,
please don't resort to calling your president a Nazi. It just devalues what you have to say that you'd resort to using an extreme that is no longer carrying any value to it because it has been overused.
There's been a spike in hate crimes.
Yes, and those hate crimes seem to be coming from a particular political side. It is rather sad, to be honest.
Now, some have been one specific that comes to mind has been confirmed as not real. But just by the law of averages, some of those are real. And that means that there's been a spike in the attack on minorities, right? Or people with minority identities, right? Like maybe gay or something like that, right?
Operating under the guise of law of averages without any evidence to substantiate your claim means that you are just asserting it, which means that when you say there's been a spike based on an assertion or an assumption without any evidence to back it up, means you're lying. This would have been better if you provided sources to back this up, and if I remember correctly, you only had one source in your original upload, and it wasn't for this.
That's not propaganda. That's a fact.
Directing this at you in the video that you have made to me in response. Show me. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but if you're going to say it happens, you need to prove it.
And you have to think about these things also. These are young people. I myself am 22. I have no idea how old you are.
At time of recording on the 17th of May 2017, I am 31.
But if you think about the spaces online that we occupy, think about all the things that you've seen, said, and all that stuff online. It'd be absolutely intellectually dishonest that you've never seen anything that was just outright, totally racist towards either white people, black people, whatever.
That is very true, and I'm glad you acknowledge that racism can happen towards white people, something often overlooked by quite a lot of people I make videos against.
So, for me, it seems really stupid to attempt to say that, oh, they're being misled by the media. Like, no, they could be being influenced by their own eyeballs, stuff that they see, like maybe even just like right here on YouTube. Like, there is literally a guy who's implicitly advocating a violent revolution to achieve ethno-nationalism.
Yes, and chances are their eyes have seen things that have been directed towards them or they have been targeted by the media. It is one of many different variables. It is the most obvious one though, that is why I highlighted it. And I would really like to know the name of that ethno-nationalism channel, because I would love to make videos against them. I don't really care for anyone who advocates for a one-race country. And it has been something I've covered recently with some free speech people, people advocating for certain types of censorship when it suits them.
I'm sorry, but especially given these instances of people randomly calling people nigger and...
The word nigger does not belong to any one person or any one race. And offense is taken, not given.
Vandalizing certain things, burning people's houses down.
You mean like Antifa or Black Lives Matter, who do more, if anything, to harm race relations than anything else?
You know, like that happened. That's a real thing. A black guy who was a firefighter, no less, had his house burned down because he was black.
For those that don't know, he is talking about the instance where Matthew Gerardo burnt down the house of his neighbour, where 2 days earlier the neighbour received a racially threatening letter. Whether the two are linked is unknown, but you want to focus on the fact that the white neighbour who lost his job for not being a trained firefighter burnt down his neighbour's house who happened to be black, forgetting for a second here that that particular black man is married to a white woman.
These people have actual things to be afraid of. When the black crime rate is on a downturn, but the violence and especially killings by cops is on an uptick, right? On a disproportionate uptick. You have something to be scared of. That means that it's very likely that even though you're very unlikely to be a person who's done anything or doing anything that warrants killing you, you could die. That is a thing that should scare people.
White people make up 62% of the US population and 49% of those who are killed by police officers. African Americans make up 13% of the population and account for 24% of those fatally shot. More white people die. Unless, of course, you wanted to commit a mass genocide to even out the numbers entirely, your argument has no credibility whatsoever.
If they did not react to it, I would wonder what the fuck's wrong with their head. Who the fuck could see cases like Sandra Bland, Rukia Boyd, Tamir Rice, and just myriad of videos that we can just find online with just random minorities and especially black people, as particularly black males, being killed while doing essentially nothing to threaten the officer.
I am not going to go looking for videos of white people being assaulted or shot by police to prove a point. Needless to say, it is the internet, and it is highly likely those videos exist on some platform somewhere. The fact you are using the minorities being attacked by police argument means you believe the percentages should outweigh the actual numbers.
It makes sense. And then the backlash from especially, people who are more so on the right, defending these people, even when they're wrong, even in cases where we know their shooting was unjustified, there was no reason to shoot that person, such as the Slager and the Scott thing. There is literally some white people and a black sellout, let's not forget him, who did not feel as if they could come to a fucking guilty verdict on Slager's case. They said they couldn't convict him. We have him on video and it stops dead in his tracks. It's just frustrated. I'm not chasing this guy. Unloads a clip into his back. And there are people still residing in this country, walking right next to, their black asses, who would defend someone who did something like that, right? To someone who looks like them.
Being English and in a country that has very few guns, I don't ever condone using guns to resolve any kind of instance of argument or disobeying of the law. I do, however, want to highlight your two comments of black sellout and to someone that looks like them. The brotherhood. The you must unite behind someone because you share skin tone. How very enlightening. I'm
sorry, but that's a thing you should be afraid of. When people go to shoot people or whatever, nobody gives a fuck that I'm me or you or you or any of that shit. It's just like a thing. It's just a split second. It happens.
I'll agree that if you're not afraid to be shot, there's something wrong with your head, because obviously the risk of death is very real. But the argument of it's just a thing doesn't stack up as one that I regard as valid. And rather than using these lovely little assertions to argue against me, who's offering commentary to an article, why don't you offer me or come up with a solution to counter my commentary, which you haven't done yet?
You know, and if there's an idea or whatever that you're more threatening or whatever, given because of who you are or because of stereotypes or whatever, that's a thing that you should be afraid of as a black person. That makes sense. It's perfectly logical. If you see enough people being harmed for what appears to be no reason, and we can pile videos like that are on YouTube that are like hours long, hour long compilations of cops dealing with white people who are literally fighting them, oftentimes armed, and them not being killed, it would seem that they have something very unique to be afraid of.
There is a certain level of naivety that goes into your commentary on these compilations of white people wrestling police and not being shot. Much like there are compilations of black people wrestling police and not being shot. Much like there are Hispanic people wrestling police and not getting shot. Your argument is flawed because you assume this is representative of all police interactions, forgetting the percentage of white people who die at the hands of police shootings. Regardless of circumstance, of course, because each individual case must be treated individually, of course. But the numbers do speak for themselves.
And to act like they're just being misled by the medias, like, that's just bullshit. Not to mention, we also have reports of fucking the FBI finding that like over 1,000 white supremacists from the website Stormfront have made attempts or have successfully infiltrated law enforcement. Like, there's a lot of stuff to fear there.
Yes, I did a little digging into this one, and it's going to be tricky to answer, so I'm going to try it this way. The FBI has found that there are some white supremacists that work within law enforcement. Yes, there are people in all walks of life that hold different values, but when in a position like law enforcement, that person must put those aside and operate under the mantra of they are there to enforce the law. If they don't, they are disciplined and or fired. And in some cases, if they go too far, put in prison, where they will most likely be anally probed until their sphincter no longer operates as it should, and instead left a gaping chasm.
To pretend like it's not you're just an ideologue. Like, that's just bullshit. That right there feels over real.
I never pretended it's not. I merely offered the most obvious answer, and I might be an ideologue. It's so hard to tell these days. Now, I'm getting a bit bored, so I'm going to go and answer one more of your little comments on the next clip you play of me. If I'm not impressed, I'm going to end it. And I will give my audience, i.e. all of you that watch this, I'll leave a pinned comment if you want me to continue with this video. There is at least another 10 minutes. So, continue. The floor should be branded as a safe space for all black students. Earlier this article mentioned people of colour. Now we have UCLA having demands made of them to create exclusively black environments. As California has quite a big racial demographic, will UCLA also pander to other races to give them spaces of their own, or are only black students making the demands? As for the creation and support of a UCLA Afro House, the demands state many black students cannot afford to live in Westwood with the high prices of rent. An Afro House would provide a cheaper alternative housing solution for black students that would also serve as a safe space for black Bruins to congregate and learn from each other. Now, I am all for supporting anyone that has problems being able to support themselves to an extent, but if you choose to go to UCLA, you already know that it will get costly. You could have chosen another college. I'm not now trying to say that black people need to get out of LA because they're poor. No, I apply this to anyone that chooses a college that they cannot afford to go to or live by. This includes all that they are entitled to loan and grant-wise, and even family support, if any, of course. The fact is, only the truly disadvantaged should get any help or assistance, but they should consider other and more reasonably priced colleges and accommodation first. This should apply to anyone of any race and not a single racial group because we're oppressed.
So for some reason, you're equating like these people making these demands with them saying that only they should get them.
The language in that particular article was quite clear. If they wanted to be truly inclusive, they would have mentioned other races rather than putting black race front and center.
Nowhere in the article or in the demands did it say that. It said that they want these things for black people. It's like when, back in the day, when the NAACP or Martin Luther King or whoever said that they want these things for black children, for black people, whatever, that it's like you're saying that these people are saying that only they should get it. That's not what they said.
The difference between then and now is that back then they didn't have rights, freedom, space, whereas now they do and are equal to other people of different races.
They're advocating on their own behalf. That's why you're only hearing about like people. And as opposed to, pandering to other races, if some collaborative wants to come together and advocate for whatever other group, I'm pretty sure they would be heard out by the school. I mean, the school is essentially a private entity, right? And they're going to be beholden to what is essentially their constituents, which are people who, pay them, which are the students.
Yes, and that beholden to the students who pay for them has gone down a bit since admissions has dropped at quite a number of universities where these more progressive ideals are pushed.
So, yeah, it kind of makes sense that they more than likely would. You're just hearing about the black ones because they're the ones making the demand. Nowhere in that list does it say that only we can have these things and you shouldn't do it for anyone else, even if they ask.
On the very first page, this is what it says. The language is pretty clear. I'm now done with you. If you want to see a second part of this, please leave a comment below on the pinned comment asking if you'd like a second part. And thank you all for listening.